Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. It is Tuesday, August 11th, and we're certainly pleased to have everybody here tonight. We'll start our meeting by introducing you to your City Council.
Council members Rolfing.
Here.
Staggers.
Present.
Anderson.
Here.
Erickson. Here. Erpenbach.
Here.
Jameson.
Here.
Karski.
Here.
Kiley.
Here.
Thank you very much. In Sioux Falls, we start our meetings with an invocation, and we're very, very blessed to have Pastor Alan Brummel of the Heritage Protestant Reformed Church here in Sioux Falls to lead us in that invocation. Pastor, welcome.
Thank you.
What we'd ask you to do is to stand for the invocation and then remain standing for our Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor Brummel, thank you.
Let's pray. Our Father who art in heaven, we come before thee, the creator of heaven and earth, the one who holds our lives in thy hands. We're thankful for the freedom enjoyed in this great country, thankful for those whom thou hast raised up to defend our liberty, to preserve our union, and to maintain law and order. We're thankful for the wise, fearless leaders and commanders given in time of need. And now, Lord, we're thankful for these men and women whom thou hast given unto us here in Sioux Falls as city council members and mayor. Give unto them what they stand in need of, to preserve peace and unity, maintain law and good order, and to be good stewards of that with which we've been blessed. Give them wisdom, defend them from evil, enrich them with good, so that the people may prosper in freedom under the laws maintained for good order and for the glory and honor of thy name. Keep us humble, forgive us our sinful pride. May we be thankful in prosperity, patient in adversity, and in all things put our trust in thee. May all that is done in this evening and in all of our labors be to the glory and honor of thy name. Keep us from sin and from temptation. Through the power of Jesus Christ our Lord, grant that we might abound in all good works, and that we might live not for the things here below, but for that heavenly kingdom of which these earthly kingdoms are but a faint picture. We pray this for Jesus' sake. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. If I could get our community health team to come forward, I'd appreciate it. And would you mind introducing the team, please, to the City of Sioux Falls?
Hi, I'm Alicia Calora with the City of Sioux Falls Health Department.
I'm Linda Ross with the Community Healthcare Association of the Dakotas.
I'm Danielle Van Persum with Community Healthcare Association of the Dakotas.
Well, thanks for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. On behalf of the people of Sioux Falls, I do have a proclamation I would like to read. Whereas, for 50 years, America's community health centers have provided high-quality, cost-effective, and accessible primary and preventative care to all individuals, regardless of insurance status or ability to pay. Whereas, 1 in every 15 people living in the United States depends on the services of a community health center. Whereas, health centers are located in medically underserved areas and locally controlled by patient majority boards, making each health center responsive to the needs of the community it serves. Whereas, the health center model continues to prove an effective means of overcoming barriers to access, including geography, income, and insurance status, and in doing so, improves healthcare outcomes and reduces healthcare system costs. Whereas, health centers across the country save the entire health system approximately $24 billion annually by coordinating care, managing chronic conditions, and keeping patients out of costlier healthcare settings, which reduces the unnecessary, avoidable, and wasteful use of health resources. Whereas Falls Community Health provides comprehensive services such as medical, dental, and behavioral health services to more than 13,000 residents per year in the Sioux Falls area. Whereas National Health Center Week offers the opportunity to recognize Falls Community Health, their dedicated staff, and board members, and to celebrate the legacy of America's health centers and their vital role in shaping the future of America's healthcare system. Now, therefore, I, Mike Cuther, Mayor of the City of Sioux Falls, do hereby proclaim August 9th through the 15th as National Health Center Week in Sioux Falls, and I encourage all residents to learn more about Falls Community Health and celebrate the important partnership between our community health center and the residents they serve. And again, that was 13,000 folks right here in Sioux Falls. Let's give them a round of applause, please. Councilors, thank you for that. Appreciate it. We'll now move to our consent agenda. Councilors, any motions, changes?
Move for approval, Anderson.
Second, Erpenbach.
Councilor Anderson Jr. has made a motion to approve our consent agenda, seconded by Councilor Erpenbach. Any motions, changes? Roll call vote, please.
Council members Rolfing.
Yes.
Staggers.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Erickson. Yes. Erpenbach.
Yes.
Jameson.
Yes.
Karski.
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. Now our regular agenda, Council. Any changes to that?
Move to
For approval, Kylie.
Second,
Councilor Kylie has made a motion to approve our meeting agenda tonight, seconded by Councilor Erpenbach. A roll call vote, please.
Council members Rolfing.
Yes.
Staggers.
Yes.
Anderson. Erickson. Yes. Erpenbach.
Yes.
Jameson.
Yes.
Karski.
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
That is also passed 8-0. Again, welcome tonight, folks. Good to have you here. We appreciate you being engaged in our community. This is a great time for you to talk to the council, talk to the people of our town about any topic that you think is important. We'd ask you to just come forward, introduce yourself, as well as keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. We would appreciate that. Welcome.
Good evening, Greg Neitzert. With everything I say here at public input and all the things I do behind the scenes, I have one goal, which is to make sure citizens are treated fairly and everyone receives due process. I want to make clear again how much I like and respect city employees. They're good public servants. Sometimes we disagree on policy, and I may disagree with some of the decisions they make, but that doesn't affect my view of them personally, and I hope that attitude is reciprocal. One of my passions is zoning. I have a particular respect for planning staff because I know him so well. That especially includes Director Cooper. I think he's a great asset to the city. I hope he therefore takes this in the right spirit. I was very concerned last week when I was watching the Planning Commission, and it occurred when there was a conditional use petition, which you see up on your screen here, to allow a video lottery within 500 feet of a sensitive use. If you go to the next slide. So to set this up, if we look at the definitions in the zoning ordinance, the word shall is mandatory and not discretionary. The word may is permissive. And then if you look at the definition of a conditional use is any use that, owing to certain special characteristics attendant to its operation, may be permitted in a zoning district. Note the word may, it doesn't say shall. Next slide. So again, conditional use permits, the Planning Commission may authorize, and then it says the Planning Commission shall impose those conditions as are appropriate and necessary to ensure compliance with the comprehensive plan and protect the health, safety, and general welfare in the issuance of the conditional use permit. Once again, note the word may and not shall in reference to granting it. They can grant it or they can deny it. And note the wide latitude that they're given in the conditions that they could place. The plain, unambiguous language of the zoning ordinance makes it clear a conditional use can be denied by the Planning Commission or the City Council, and they have wide latitude regarding the conditions they can impose. There is a quote from the city staff: "You don't get to approve or deny it, you get to look at the 4 conditions." Staff who provide guidance to the Commission tells them flat out they cannot deny a conditional use permit. He also references 4 conditions. We'll get to that later. Where in the ordinance does it say that the Planning Commission and you cannot deny a conditional use permit. Why does the code say may grant a conditional use permit if it's not discretionary? Shouldn't it say shall? What case law says this? Why is city staff ignoring and directly contradicting the plain language of the zoning ordinance? Have you ever voted no to deny a conditional use permit? I know some of you have. Is city staff saying you broke the law when you did so? The South Dakota Supreme Court has upheld cases where a conditional use permit was denied. What does city staff know that the South Dakota Supreme Court doesn't? Next slide. Citizens voice concerns regarding hours of operation, traffic, safety of children, proximity to residential uses, among other concerns. When a citizen voiced concerns about the hours of operation, the applicant is called up who says, I guess at this point that's not what we're here for. We're here for a conditional use. The chair of the Planning Commission says after his statement, quoting, I agree. That's not what we're here for, in reference to what he said. So hours of operation are not a consideration at a conditional use hearing? It cannot be considered or stipulated? Really? If not at a conditional use hearing, then when? Is that really what the code says, or is this a directive from city staff? So what does the code say about hours of operation? So if the citizens voice concerns about the hours of operation, recall the language for the conditional use. They can place appropriate conditions. And then if we look at 16608, information on conditional use plans, in supplemental information, the Planning Commission or the City Council may approve additional conditions to be shown on a conditional use plan, addendum, and then if you go down to G, hours of operation, and then C, there's proposed on-premise signage types, which is something else that they brought up, and I'll get to that. Next slide. Here's a conditional use permit approval, and if we look at it, this was for the Walgreens on 26th Street. And if you look at it, number 4, what were one of the conditions? Hours of operation are limited from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Next slide. So why would the planning staff support a condition they say is illegal? Did that city council break the law? Staff goes on to say that all commercial uses in this area, quote, are all going to have unlimited hours. How can he say that? What code says that? Then he says signage will be unlimited. Again, how can he say that? What specific code says that? And then if we go back to the 16608, it talks about that they can put limits on signage. So after all the citizens speak and their concerns are summarily dismissed, Planning Commission members ask what their power is regarding a conditional use. Once again, staff quoting exactly. It's an allowed use and it's allowed with conditions. You don't get to approve or deny it. You get to look at the 4 conditions. Again, what code says a conditional use permit cannot be denied? He also says you get to look at the 4 conditions. He tells the commission these 4 conditions are the only ones that you can place. But is that the only 4 that can be considered or stipulated? Let's check the code. I'm just about done. Section 16616, conditional use standards outline specific considerations for specific uses. And then it lists the on-sale alcohol beverage establishment and it lists the 4 conditions that he's talking about. All the specific uses they list specific conditions that only apply to those. But at the beginning of it, it says, conditional use standards. These standards shall be construed to be the minimum requirements for any of the specific conditional uses, and the Planning Commission or City Council can require additional conditions at their discretion. In all cases, the impact of the proposed use on the adjacent properties will be a major consideration. The code is very clear. The specific considerations are not the only consideration and conditions that can be placed. Staff simply misrepresents the plain language of the code after being told they do not have the power to deny a conditional use and they can only consider those 4 conditions. The Planning Commission approves it with no discussion. Am I over my time?
Yes, Greg, and I know you're a stickler for the rules, and right now you're at 6:07.
Okay, all right. So I would just finish by just saying, under these arbitrary rules, the deck is stacked, and what are citizens supposed to do? What is the point of a conditional use permit hearing? I don't know where this guidance is coming from, so you need to look at it.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate that. Folks, anybody else? Welcome.
Scott Arisman, Sioux Falls. I actually didn't know what Greg was going to talk about tonight, so I wanted to bring up something. Jeffrey Schmidt, who he was referring to here, was at Democratic Forum a few months ago, and Jeffrey Schmidt talked about how they go through the process, the conditional use, and that the planning department will recommend something, and then the planning commission will recommend something, and then it'll come to the city council, and then they'll, vote for it. And we had a back and forth, and I said to Jeff, but the city council can deny it, though. Is that correct? And he said, well, if this and that, and I go, no, they have the power to deny it, correct? And he said, well, I suppose if they don't like the applicant. But Greg said it best. It's a language thing. And you can deny. The planning department and the planning commission can come here and they can say, yippee yah hey, we got to do this. But you guys can vote against it. You can. That's what a conditional use permit is for. It's to listen to the citizens' concerns. Well, let's talk about something I was actually here for. I saw that we're closing the pools down early this year, and I guess it concerns me a little bit. We're going to have a pool that's going to be open 360 days out of the year, and I'm kind of concerned about how we're going to staff that. We talked about we can't have high school kids and we can't have college students. So how are we going to staff a 360-day year pool? And the Parks Department has known about this for a long time, that the school start date has changed. They've known about it since spring. What about teachers? Teachers are always looking for part-time help in the summertime. Can't they be lifeguards? There's all kinds of people. I think it's a wage issue, actually. There's a lot of people who are not going to work for $9.50, $10 an hour to be a lifeguard, which I don't understand. That'd be kind of fun for $10 an hour. But I think that next year, the Parks Department needs to work on keeping the pools open, all the outdoor pools, all the way up until school starts, simply because all we've ever complained about with the indoor aquatic center was, gosh darn it, these kids can't swim in the winter. But we have 3 weeks of summer left, the hottest weeks of the year, and the pools are closed. That's just ridiculous. And then for the last thing I want to talk about is, I noticed the city is using Promone to spray for mosquitoes. And I know West Nile is a concern. It's a disease that kills. But Promone is a very dangerous chemical, and I know it's concentrated down. But in its regular form, and when it's concentrated, it's very highly flammable and explosive. It kills bees, it kills insects, it kills small animals. It's bad for vegetation and gardens. It's a very poisonous chemical. And this is from Bayer, who makes the product. This is their description. Just Google it. They have a whole document on what their product does. And that concerns me. Now, a lot of people say, well, if we stop spraying, then all these people are going to get West Nile. And I say, well, maybe we should go to Wall Lake and spray everyone down with suntan lotion so they don't get skin cancer. But there are products out there that we can use. There's one that's called BTI, and what it is it's a bacteria, and it's put into a spray form, and all it eats is gnats, mosquitoes, and black flies. It actually crawls inside of them and eats their innards out. It's a nasty little creature, but it doesn't hurt anything else. It only attacks those 3 bugs. It has no effect on vegetable gardens or anything else. It has no chemical. Oh, actually, Promone is really bad for the water, too, and I started thinking about how we're the 13th most polluted riverway in the country. And so it kills fish, too, by the way. So I know that BTI is probably more expensive. I didn't do a cost thing back and forth. But there are alternatives to using a very bad chemical that is not just bad, it kills the mosquitoes and gets rid of West Nile, but it's killing the bees who pollinate. It's hurting our vegetables. It's hurting our waterway. And there's other things that we can do. So I hope in the future we consider this. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Folks, anybody else want to engage the council? Welcome. Ms. Colby.
Excuse me. Robert Colby. Most of you here are looking at government through the windshield, and I'm more or less looking at it through the rearview mirror. I've always enjoyed when the people used to come down to the county commission and used to come here to the city council, and they would sit and watch and listen and make comments. My relationship to Sioux Falls goes back to 1952 when my parents went through and I got my first pair of wool slacks. In 1964, I took my physical for the selective service just down the street here, and I remember eating lunch at the Rushmore Cafe, and of the 40 people that took the physical, 2 of us didn't pass. I got the same deferment as Cassius Clay. One of the other guys had a car. I rode back to Lamar's with him, and the other 38 went down to the liquor store, got a bottle, and got summarily wasted. In 1969, I came back to Sioux Falls. My wife had the librarian job at Sioux Falls College, now USF. 1972, I opened my shop, hoping to be there 45 years, 43 down. 1981, I started watching the county commission. After a while, I figured, you know, these guys aren't any smarter than I am, so I decided to run, and the first run was with Jack Rentschler, Bill Reynolds, myself, and another person, and I can't remember the name, and I had half the votes that Jack Rentschler had, and I thought, that's encouraging. The next time, in '86, I ran. Jim Zweep and I were in the same race, 7 people for 3 jobs. I went to bed number 3, woke up in the morning number 4. Jim Zweep had beaten me by 52 votes, and each of us had over 5,000. In the 20 years of being on the county commission, I had the privilege of being I had the privilege of being the chair of the commission for 5 of those years. We instituted public comment, which I always thought was valuable. Some places people get up and they play musical instruments just because it's public comment. Items of interest that I learned, I was on the Wall Lake dredging force for 3 years and found out one thing: you can't fire a volunteer. We did get the job done anyhow. I chaired the group that looked at the aquifer protection here for Minnehaha County. Brookings County had used wellhead protection, 50 feet, 100 feet, 500 feet, 250 feet. We decided to cover the whole of the aquifer from bank to bank, which was a benefit for the city of Sioux Falls, and I think that that's one of the best things that we did. Found out also that the bureaucrats who sit out here are no better than the person who can fire them. The bureaucrats that sit out here are no better than the person that can fire them. You know, we had Robert's Rules of Order, and one of the things that I learned there was that when you have a motion, you ask for a motion, and if it's not popular, you ask 3 times for a second before you bury the motion for lack of a second. And I understand, you know, the museum every year has a ghost tour, and City Hall is on the list now for the next ghost tour because it's been told, or I've heard, that Rosemary Wood's spirit, she died in 2005, infests this place because there was a 14-second lack of one of the tapes that the city has and records. So who knows, with a little luck and a reoccurrence, why, we might make Fox News.
Thank you, Ms. Colby. Is there anybody else who want to engage the council? Welcome.
Sierra Broussard, Sioux Falls. I was here last week, spoke to your secretary, Mayor. It was a shame that she wasn't here on some issues that we were concerned in the city. I have contacted your chief of police. Your secretary has contacted chief of police. Thank God that he has resigned his position and he is no longer in office as of October the 16th. As I stated for the alderman people, I am sorry for this issue that arose last week. It was an issue between me and the mayor that I have been asking for 4 weeks for your attention for this human trafficking, all of these crimes that are occurring in the city that is not handled correctly by the police department. As a civil rights activist, I shouldn't have to go in a public accommodation and start suing because people are discriminated by race or age. It is your responsibility. You're the ones that put these businesses here. They need to be trained on public accommodation discrimination. Your secretary told me that she was going to be here on top of the chief of police to hear me out on these issues and so say you were sick. Your Honor, Mayor, I do not like to get in politics. This is my last time in here, but I'm not pleased how you run the city at all. You don't run it, you're here for the people. The chief of police is here for the people. You're not here. The people don't work for you. The people don't work for the chief of police. The chief of police, when he is leaving the position he's leaving, that was in the best interest for him. because I can see it on the outside. Talking to people, looking at the people, looking at situations in the city, looking at the crime level, it was time for him to leave. 25, 30 years as a police officer, that's great. But it didn't take him as a chief of police to run the city right? No. If I would get into details, which I'm not because the public is involved here, and I don't want the public paranoid, but we have a lot of issues arising here. Just yesterday, last night, for example, I rode the taxi. We was robbed at gunpoint. Did he call the police? No. Why? Why didn't you call the police? He has dealt with the police twice on the issues of robbery, and nothing has gotten done about it. These are the issues that we're facing. We're facing prostitution. We're facing human trafficking. Rape every day. People on the street corners selling drugs. On the street corners. When crimes like that happen in a city, it's because the community and the police are not working together, or the police is not doing their job, one of the two. Nobody should be on a street corner selling crack cocaine on the street, especially 2 blocks from the police station. Mayor, I don't have nothing else to say. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do my activist work, and I'm going to get involved in the community. And, it might be political. You might not agree with my tactics, but when I start catching these public accommodations, they either get the education that they need, or we're going to start filing civil lawsuits, and we're going to start shutting the businesses down. And then that's all that I have to say here, Mayor. But I shouldn't have to, in 4 weeks, talk to your secretary and then talk to you and then have to come here and talk to you and can't even come to your office to talk to you. That is ridiculous here. It is a shame, honestly. Putting politics aside here, I cannot wait to the new election for mayor. I've been from city to city to city and did community activists for years and never seen a community like this. Please, Mayor, while you're in office in 2018, please, when people call your office, speak to them. Listen to what they have to say, because the crime is here. And it's about to start more and more every day. But no, nobody got time to listen to that. You rather just listen to people that want to put flowers on a boulevard. And then we're going to cover that up with water, and it's easy to do that. But when you get to community problems, nobody wants to hear about that because it's too time-consuming. It's too many manpower hours at the police department. It's too many manpower hours to the mayor. But we have these issues. You don't want the crime here. You don't want people from Chicago here. You don't want riots to happen. You don't want protests. We don't want Ferguson, Missouri to happen here. And it's going to happen. Eventually, it's reality here. And I hope everybody in the background is listening to me. You have to be aware of your surroundings, okay? That's all I have to say. This is my last time. Thank y'all all that I have called and I have talked to last week about these issues. And I am sorry that I came so abrupt last week with y'all. Mayor, it is a disgrace that you wasn't here.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Folks, is there anybody else?
Can I ask her just 2
Counselor,
questions?
no. Is there anybody else who wanted to engage the council, please? Very good. Councilors, let's move on to item number 9, please.
Second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, approving amendments to water tank lease agreement numbers 14-3449 and 14-3450.
Greg Anderson, Public Works Water Purification. I'm standing in for Darren Freeze, Water Program Coordinator. We're here tonight to present 2 amendments with existing tower lease agreements. The purpose for the amendments is to document the transfer of existing communication equipment from the Menlo Avenue Water Tower to the 57th Street Water Tower. So if there are no questions with dealing with these 2 amendments, we're asking for your support and approve.
Thank you very much. Folks, this is the second reading, so you do have the opportunity to engage the council on this topic. Did anybody want to speak to this item? Councilors?
Move approval, Rolfing.
Second.
Councilor Rolfing's been a motion to approve this item. It was seconded by Councilor Karski. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Councilmembers Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Erfenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Kiley?
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. Thank you. Item 10,
Second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the Code of Ordinances of the city by amending Section 30.022 ordinances, resolutions, motions, and other documents.
Council,
Yes.
did you want to cover this, or did Jim David? What would you want to handle this, Council?
I'll go ahead and say something about this.
Sure. Councilor?
Yes. Seems to be some misunderstanding as to what this is all about. Very simply, it's just about transparency. That's all it is. When I was first on the council back in 2002, 2003, we would get property tax increases, and I didn't really know, how did this happen? And I would ask a number of people on the council, they didn't really know either. Well, what this does, it very simply says the following. Let me read this. When the annual appropriation ordinance authorizes the maximum property tax allowed by law, the annual appropriation ordinance title shall include the following statement: authorizing an increase in property taxes. That's all this does. So when you have a citizen or a council member, or anybody for that matter, going through the agenda and they're reading the titles of the different ordinances, they'll have greater knowledge as to what's in this ordinance when there is a property tax increase. When I was in the state senate, if we voted for any tax increase, it had to be in a title. And once again, all this is just providing information for people. Nothing more, nothing less. It doesn't increase property taxes. It doesn't decrease property taxes. It just informs people in the title that we're dealing with property tax.
Councilor Stegers, thank you. Folks, this is a second reading, so you actually have the opportunity to engage the council on this topic. Greg, go right ahead.
Greg Kneitzert, and I swear I wasn't in collusion with Councilor Staggers, because pretty much what I'm going to say is going to echo what he has. But I did want to say that this isn't a debate about taxation. It's about transparency. This is a no-brainer for me. I would go farther and require any tax to be its own ordinance, but this is a good first step. Burying a tax levy in a giant appropriations ordinance is not transparency. I'm somebody who's followed the city for years, and I've never quite understood how, my property tax was shifting on me every year, because it just wasn't discussed. It was just buried somewhere. Whether an increase any particular year, including this year, is necessary is a debate for another day. It has nothing to do with this. This is simply a transparency ordinance. That's all you're voting on. Vote yes.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. Scott, go ahead.
I would echo that. I think that government needs to be transparent, and anytime, even tonight, if you look at the agenda item, you don't even know what it's about because it was the way it was written. And I think that anytime we're increasing taxes, because that's kind of what it's about, we need to tell people, especially when we're increasing taxes, it needs to be very vocal on why we're doing it and explained and told to people. And there's probably a lot of people don't even know that you guys are voting on this tonight. So error in transparency all the time.
Thanks, Scott. Folks, anybody else? Councilors?
Move for approval, Anderson.
Second, Jameson.
Councilor Anderson Jr. made a motion to approve this item, second by Councilor Jameson. Discussion, Councilor Jameson?
If I could, I've been on the council for a while and served with Kermit over the years, and he's kind of brought this language every year, but at a different time, a time when we were approving the budget and wanting to change the language, and we're all kind of a little caught up in the last-minute approach. I think this is maybe it's the fine time to do it. It does add transparency, and I appreciate it in advance versus like he's done it in the past. So that's all I have.
Councilors, any other comments? Councilor Ruffin?
It appears to me that this is a South Dakota codified law. Is that right, Danny? The way the wording is? And is there a problem if we add language to it because it authorizes us to do that in the wording that they have?
Well, if you approve the wording, it does make it a little confusing because South Dakota codified law defines a property increase differently than what this escalator really is.
Right.
And so it would be a little confusing and would be contrary to state law if you approved it.
That was my feeling, and I'm glad I asked that, because I would suggest, Councilor Sagers, at this point, I'm going to vote no again. No, not because it's transparency, but the place it should come from is South Dakota State Legislature, not from Sioux Falls City Council.
Actually,
Councilor Mbach?
I need clarification on that because I don't think I agree with Councilor Rolfing on that. I think what Councilor Staggers is saying is that he just wants us to, in simple language, when we're voting on that ordinance, that the ordinance title, which we create, South Dakota codified law doesn't establish the wording for our ordinances, I don't believe. All that he's saying is that he wants to add the words property tax increase into the title of that ordinance.
I think we heard from our attorney that was...
Danny, did you have a comment to Councilor Mbach's comment?
Well, I would say that when you refer to codified law, when it talks about a property tax increase, it's referring to what's known as a resolution for opt-out. And there's a specific procedure for that. When you talk about just adding in the escalator, that's done for inflation purposes, which allows you to impose a maximum tax allowed by law, which is not considered a property tax increase pursuant to our code. So if you start calling that, it does cause confusion and is contrary to the South Dakota codified law.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, what this...
Councilor Sagers, just 1 second, please, sir. Hang on. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Councilors, any other comments before I go back to Councilor Staggers? Yes, Councilor Erickson. Thank you, Councilor Staggers.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
What law is that? Where are we? I'm not questioning you. I'm clearly not an attorney, and I know you are. I know I do not write these titles. So who exactly writes the title? What law are you referring to that I can read it in simple?
Sure. What I'm referring to is South Dakota Codified Law 1013-36 that sets forth the provision to increase property tax by a municipality, which has certain provisions and certain conditions that you have to satisfy in order to impose a tax that's greater than the escalator. There's not, you can put any language you want in your ordinance. You have the right to do that if you want to put that language in there. It's just that when you have language that contradicts state law, it can be confusing, and that's the only point I'm trying to make.
So if I can follow up, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
So would you, Danny, would you suggest, since we can add wording, what words would you suggest that would fulfill the same intent that Councilor Staggers has, that wouldn't conflict with South Dakota codified law? So does it mean authorizing an increase, a potential increase in property tax allowed by South Dakota codified law 1013-36, and we just refer it right back to that state law, that would then, there's got to be, we're creative, we can do this.
Well,
I'm confident.
I guess our recommendation would be to keep it the same and not change the language.
But are there options? That's my question.
There's always options, but I didn't sit down and figure out what a language might be appropriate or not appropriate. So.
Thank you.
Councilor Kiley.
I guess, Councilor, two questions. One to Councilor Staggers. Did you have a chance to meet with our city attorneys regarding the language on this?
We had our city attorney, once I indicated I wanted to present to this to the city council, it went right to the city attorney's office. And then they actually wrote that.
Second question, Councilor Kiley.
I'm wondering if a deferment of this item isn't in order so that it can be discussed further between councilors and city attorney staff.
Did you want to make a motion to defer, Councilor Kiley?
Yes.
Did anybody want to second that?
Second.
Yeah, Councilor Anderson Jr. seconded that. There's been a motion to defer this item to a later date.
1 week.
Councilor Buck?
I was just going to say we'll defer it for 1 week to allow the wording, if friendly amendment to your...
That's fine.
Councilor Kiley has made a motion with a friendly amendment to defer this item for 1 week to allow the city attorney's office to work with Councilor Staggers on this item. It has been seconded by Councilor Anderson Jr., if that's okay. Councilor Staggers?
I was going to ask another question of our attorney. You said 10-13-36 dealt with a question when there's an escalator. This has nothing at all to do with escalating it beyond the rate of inflation. In other words, is 10-13-36 actually applicable here?
Well, 1013-35 is the escalator statute. 1013-36 is the resolution for opt-out, which refers to an excess levy.
Been a motion to defer this item. It has been seconded. A roll call vote, please.
Council members Rolfing,
Yes.
Staggers,
Yes.
Anderson, Erickson,
Yes.
Erpenbach,
Yes.
Jamison,
Yes.
Karski,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. Thank you. Item 11.
A resolution approving the special assessment role for the mowing of weeds and grasses in various areas in the city of Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Mike Cooper, Planning and Building Services. Tonight we're bringing you our annual list of properties that have unpaid charges for mowing within the city of Sioux Falls. Our department is charged with enforcement of our nuisance vegetation ordinance through our property maintenance group led by three people that are here tonight with me. Kelly Boyson is our chief property maintenance inspector. Ron Bell oversees our building services division, and then Russ Sorensen has been helping with overall code enforcement through the planning office. So this list that we're bringing you today is dated it includes July and most of September from last year, July and most of September from 2014. It includes 94 properties. 84 of those are north of 57th Street in the Minnehaha County portion of our city limits, and 10 are south of 57th Street in the Lincoln County portion. The amount of the unpaid charges for all 94 of these properties is $11,304.23. And the map that we have up on the screen shows you the location of each of those individual properties. So we are prepared tonight to answer any questions that you have about specific properties, or if anybody comes forward tonight questioning the assessment, we can address that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. Folks, anybody want to talk to this item? Councilors?
Move for approval, Anderson.
Second, Rolfing.
Councilor Anderson Jr. has made a motion to approve this item, seconded by Councilor Rolfing. Any discussion? Yes, Councilor Karski.
Mike, I just have a question. I mean, I've looked at the list, and we've got properties that go from $30 north of $600 on the high side. How does somebody get $600 worth of weed trimming in their yard?
Kelly, welcome.
Kelly Boyson, Chief Property Maintenance Inspector. What we've done is our contracting, that is go into a low bid. It's contracted it can be contracted every year, or it can go every other year depending on if we extend the contract for a year. But it's all been on low bid. I think on some of that where we had the $30 ones, we did have a contractor that bid became low bid, and then he found out he didn't know how much it cost him to operate for an hour. So early on last year, we had to let a contractor go and take in another one, of which had a higher bid. But when they submit their bid or their contract price, they are required to take before and after photos of the property. So that's got a timestamp on it, so we can tell how long they've been there, and then they have to go on their hourly contracted rate.
Kelly, how does, Councilor Karski asked, thanks for explaining on the low side. I think Councilor Karski's more interested on the high side.
Okay.
So how does someone get $600 in fines?
On some of that, it depends on the size of their area. I didn't look to see which that is. It could be an undeveloped area.
It's a residential lot.
I didn't look to see which one that was. I apologize.
Kelly, could
it's just a larger lot. It's charged by the hour. It's still going to be, a lot of times when they go to mow, it's granted over 8 inches. It's probably closer to 12 or more. It does take longer. On some of them, on a couple of them, we did have them pick up the grass because there was just too much to leave lay there, and it's going to add more to it.
It was number 71. I don't know if you have pictures of it.
205. I don't know that they have the.
Yeah. If you want the address, 205 South Foss Avenue.
For those watching at home, Councilor Karski has asked if the team could find a specific property where they had about $600 worth of fines levied to them, and that's what the team's looking for right now.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilor.
And my thought, is this a single occurrence or is it multiple occurrences?
Kelly, could it be multiple occurrences that could generate the 600, or is this just one-time mowing?
Nope, it'll just be a one-time.
Okay.
If you'll notice on that sheet, it does say it's just an invoice number.
Okay.
So it's just for that one time.
$600 to mow a lot. They're taking hay,
right there on the top.
Sounds like that's what they did.
Sounds like it was two. Probably had to mow a couple times. Where's Foss? Oh, I thought they said.
Okay, that is the invoice there that we made. You can keep going. This is the invoice that is provided by the contractor. He had 4 men there for 4.25 hours. And if we keep scrolling here, that just shows the parcel information. Now we're coming to a photo. That's the condition of the yard. That's probably the condition of it when our inspector was there. And you'll look here at the condition, that's going to be the backyard area. This will be where our contractor come in. You'll see he started at 8:23 in the morning. There he's at his finished product at noon. And you'll look at that backyard, and he's got that all cleaned up. You know, we just determined with how much was back there, if you would have left that lay, you know, you're going to kill what's there, more weeds next year. We've had dogs on mosquito problems earlier tonight. It's just going to add to all that. So we had him clean all that up.
The Russian thistle, too. You can see that in there, too. Yes. Very good. Councilor, was that sufficient?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good job. Councilors, there's been a motion to approve these items. Seconded. A roll call vote, please.
Council members Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers? No. Anderson?
Yes.
Erickson? Yes. Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
That is passed 7-1. Item 12.
A resolution approving the special assessment roll for tree trimming in various areas in the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Kelby Maris with Parks and Recreation. Parks and Recreation is tasked with ordinance enforcement of low-hanging branches over streets and sidewalks. These 10 properties totaling $1,500 worth of assessments are a result of those code enforcement efforts. We too are also here to answer any questions that you may have.
Kelby, thank you. Appreciate that. Before I move to the council, folks, anybody want to speak to this item in the audience? Thank you. Councilors? Councilor Buck?
I just wanted to comment that those numbers are great. You know, not too many people left to pay the bills off. That's awesome. Well, that's what we like to see. I would move approval.
Thanks, Councilor.
Second, Rolfing.
Thank you, Councilor Rolfing. Appreciate that. For the second, yes, Councilor Staggers?
Yes, Kelly, these 10 assessments, I'm just guessing are probably on trees in the city boulevard. Is that right?
That's right, yep.
So they're trees that are not on the individual's property?
No, these are all trees that are in the right-of-way.
Right, city right away.
Yes.
Counselor, thank you. A roll call vote, please.
Council members Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
No.
Anderson? Erickson?
Yes.
Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
That has passed 7-1. Thank you. Item 13.
A resolution vacating the South Hillview Road right-of-way from the south right-of-way line of East 22nd Street to the south property lines of Lot 1, Block 9, and Lot 9, Block 8, Sunny View East Addition to the City of Sioux Falls as shown on Exhibit A.
Good evening, Chad Heavey with the Engineering Division of Public Works. This right-of-way is improved and is northwest of the Rosa Parks Elementary School, on East 26th Street. The petition was prepared and submitted by Doug Allen. The petitioner has complied with our street vacation policy. If this right-of-way is vacated, a utility easement will be maintained. Because this street is not used as a through street by the public, we did not require a public meeting for this. A preliminary plan for this subdivision was approved by the City Council on July 15th of 2014, and the plan approved did not include the extension of that street to the south. And this is the road that was, or the preliminary plan that was approved. This is just an easier version of that to see. I do want to point out that the area in red is the proposed street to be vacated. The area in, I'll say, white or yellow is the existing street network. The area in blue is the future street network. And the area in purple is what we have received and approved construction plans for to be constructed with this first phase. I will point out that they will have access from this subdivision via 22nd Street over to Suburban, onto 21st, and to Sycamore. They will also have access at this point after the initial construction down to Rosa Parks, or to Red Oak Drive, and thus they'd have access onto 26th Street. And so from a transportation and utility systems perspective, engineering recommends approval.
Chad, thank you. Did anybody want to speak to this item? Councilors?
Move for approval, Anderson.
Councilor Anderson Jr. has made a motion to approve this item, second by Councilor Rolfing. Councilor Rolfing.
Chad, what does the owner plan to do with the property?
He's going to build single-family homes.
Councilor Jameson.
Did you say the right-of-way area is actually improved, meaning it has a stubbed-in road?
Yes, if you, I know you can't see it here in the yellow, but there are utilities in that little stub. We will keep a utility easement there for those utilities. But yes, it was improved at some point when it was constructed.
But there's no concrete or asphalt laid?
Yes, a portion of it is.
Oh,
a portion of it is improved.
And again, what will he do with that lot?
If it is vacated, then the county will make the decision as to what happens to that vacated lot. Typically, it goes back to where it came from. So you would assume that if there's 66 feet of right-of-way there, 33 feet of that will go back to the property to the east, and 33 feet of that property will go back to the property to the west. And so then they will be gaining more property. And it is those two property owners are the ones that signed the petition.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Stagers.
Chad, are we vacating this too soon? In other words, it seems like a logical thing to maybe have Hillview Road continue on southward.
Councilor, I'll just say that this preliminary plan that you guys approved back in 2014 had this street layout as it is. And I know this was reviewed by the planning department and the engineering department, and our recommendation at that point would have been to approve this street layout.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor.
Chad, you just told me that they were going to build a house on this lot. Now you just told someone that they're going to divide it between the two neighbors.
Let me.
Maybe I'm not.
Is that what you asked me of what they're going to do with this lot? The subdivision That's what he's going to build. You see the road there? It's in the purple and blue. He'll build houses on the north side of that road and the south side.
That wasn't my question. My question is, what are they going to do with the easement?
The right-of-way will remain, I mean, the easement will remain where the right-of-way is. The utilities will remain there. It's just the land will now go back to the property owners east and to the west. They are limited to what they can do with it because we still have a utility easement on there.
Will they be required to keep it up? Will they be required?
No. What do you mean? Well, yeah, they don't need to maintain the asphalt road.
No.
If they chose to take out the curb and gutter and take out the street and put black dirt down and plant grass, they could do that, but they would have to mow it and keep it looking neat. So,
okay.
But they are limited. I mean, they could not build. They couldn't go together and build a 6-stall garage there, not over that easement.
Okay, got it. So it either stays as a street for parking, extra parking for those people in there if you want.
Yeah, most of the time when we vacate right-of-way and there's utilities there, we maintain a utility easement.
Yep.
You're going to see later tonight where we've vacated a right-of-way previously, kept the easement, now made the determination we don't need quite all that, and I think tonight we're asking you to release a portion of an easement we have on a previously vacated street.
Okay.
Yes, Councilor Karski.
Since it is a hard surface controlled by the property owners on each side, and if they wanted, they could park their boat or camper or whatever there for the length of the year, correct?
That would be a question that zoning would have to answer, I believe. I think they get more involved with that type of issue. That wouldn't be me. And I'm not going to try to speak for zoning. So,
code enforcement? Okay, thank you.
A roll call vote, please.
Council members Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
No.
Anderson?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Erdenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Kiley?
Yes.
That is passed 7-1. Item 14.
A resolution vacating the North Summit Avenue right-of-way from the south right-of-way line of West Russell Street to the north right-of-way line of West Bennett Street.
Good evening, Kurt Peppel, Public Works Engineering. Excuse me. This right-of-way shown on the map there, just west of Minnesota Avenue, near Russell Street, kind of in the north central part of Sioux Falls. It is an improved section of right-of-way. Petition was prepared and submitted by Dabbert Properties, who own both sides of the right-of-way in question. The petition was signed by the adjacent property owners per state law. The petitioner has complied with our street vacation policy. Neighborhood meeting was held on June 25th, and 3 residents attended that meeting. If the right-of-way is vacated, a utility easement will be maintained for public utilities on the vacated right-of-way. And related to that easement, we do have a change to the easement language in the resolution, and we are requesting an amendment to that original resolution. And from a transportation and utility systems perspective, engineering recommends the approval. And I believe there is someone here from the petitioner if there are questions. So.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody who wanted to speak to this item? Welcome, sir. Come forward.
I think you have 2, Mayor.
It does not matter. Yep. Doesn't matter. Go right ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Kyle Grotushin. I'm an attorney with Davenport Evans. I'm here representing Dabbert Properties and Brown and Sanger, the occupant of the proposed vacation, and just wanted to just say I'm available for questions if anybody has any about this proposed vacation. The current plan for it would be to remove the road and develop it as a parking structure, as you can see up in that drawing. We're planning to add some landscaping and some trees to the area to just make it look aesthetically appealing. Our hope is that we would get the street parking, which is currently used primarily by Brown and Sanger employees, just in a parking lot and off the street. Our hope also would be to slow down the traffic in the neighborhood so it's a little bit more conducive on that backside for the residential purposes that it's currently being used for. And with that, I guess I can open it up for questions. Oh, excuse me. I think I'm supposed to say something about the neighborhood meeting as well. The neighborhood meeting was held on June 25th. We had actually 4 residents come, and there was also a representative from Brown and Sanger and Dabbert Properties there. I was also in attendance. We discussed the proposed vacation, answered a few questions. A few concerns were raised about the vacation itself. One resident, who I believe is here, and he can speak a little more to his concerns, indicated that he used the road and that the vacation would prevent him from continuing to use the road. We don't believe that this is as large of a concern. We do note that there are sufficient routes to access both North Prairie, Russell Street, and North Duluth Avenue from Bennett and then also Rice Street, as you can see. Additionally, he did have some concerns about property values. Not sure where that concern is coming from, but we do believe that the improvements that we're making to the landscaping in the area will increase the aesthetic appeal of our property specifically, and will hopefully have a positive impact on the property values. And then finally, he did have one final concern about the street parking. There are a few residential properties in that area, but we've been tracking the street parking since the neighborhood meeting in June, and I do have a number of photos here just from various dates at various times that show that the street parking is usually vacant, if not, and if it's not vacant, it's occupied by Brown and Sanger employees, the cars that we're all familiar with. So if anybody would like to see the photos, we do have them up here, and I'd be happy to hand them around.
Kyle, thank you. Sir, welcome.
My name is Roy Wiseman. I live right in that area. North Summit, it comes to my house and then it's blocked off. So it's already blocked right there. But what I've noticed, I've been there since 2001. There's a lot of people living in that little space. There's apartments back there, and everybody living back there, they have small children, and they all have bicycles and stuff like that too, riding around. And I think what's going to happen, I've already seen it happen since Brown and Sanger took that business over. It used to be 2 separate businesses there, and there was never a problem. Now there's a lot of trucks driving down this Rice Street. That's the one that runs behind my house, and that's a residential street. And then the other area in front of my house, this has nothing to do with this, I'm just giving an example. People really speed down that street, and there's people, the people that lived across the street from me for the past 5 years, they have 6 kids, and they all have bikes and stuff. I called and made a report last year because it bothered me a little bit, but that's kind of an issue. I think it hasn't been a problem yet, but there's going to be a lot more traffic on that street. There already is. And the people do use the street because there's all the apartments that live back there, they park on the street. I don't know when they took the pictures when the people were at work, but I didn't bring them with me, but I took pictures also. I just didn't bring them with me here tonight. But there's always a lot of cars that need to get out and get onto the main street. And the other issue too is I've noticed there's other trucks that go back there, like semi-trucks and stuff, and they like to turn around there. But it's Sioux Falls, they have a lot of streets that are already blocked off, and once that's blocked off, it's never going to be unblocked again. So it'd be better, it's not a good deal to do that. It's better to just leave it, I think. But that's all I have.
Mr. Wiseman, I apologize, sir. Could you tell us where you live? Would you just...
534.
I'm sorry, we're just going to point it off on the map here, please.
It's right on the... You see where that North Summit goes to... I'm on Bailey Street.
Okay.
And then go over, but then right in the center. North Summit Avenue comes right to my driveway in the front.
Okay.
And then I've got a garage in the back. It's not a big issue for me. I use that street once in a while, not all the time, but a lot of people do use that street. And there's a lot of people that live in that little bit of area.
Okay.
There's people in apartments and with a lot of kids, and it's a crowded area.
Mr. Wiseman, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Folks, anybody else want to engage the council on this topic? Thank you. Councilors? Yes, Councilor Urbanbach.
Can you show us the map of their drawing of their proposal again, please? Okay, so it's upside down from them. Okay. I would move approval, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Karski.
Councilor Urbanbach, thank you. And Councilor Karski, thank you as well.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Anderson Jr.
Motion to amend by deleting the words after exhibit in the final paragraph and inserting the following. For drainage, sewer, and water mains and all public utility uses required or authorized by the City of Sioux Falls, and that the city clerk shall cause to be filed, with the Register of Deeds, Minnehaha County, South Dakota, and duly certified transcript of this resolution.
Councilor, thank you. Would anybody want to second that?
Urbanbach.
Thank you, Councilor Urbanbach. Councilor Anderson Jr. has made a motion to amend this resolution, and it was seconded by Councilor Urbanbach. If there's no discussion, a roll call vote on the amendment, please.
Council members Rolfing, Staggers,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
Urbanbach,
Yes.
Jameson,
Yes.
Karski,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
The amendment is passed 8-0. Councilors, we now have an amended resolution. A roll call vote, please.
Council members Rolfing,
Yes.
Staggers,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
Urbanbach,
Yes.
Jameson,
Yes.
Karski,
Yes.
Kylie.
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. Thank you. Item 15.
A resolution vacating the South Duluth Avenue right-of-way from the south right-of-way line of West 39th Street to the north right-of-way line of West 41st Street.
Good evening again, Chad Heavey with the Engineering Division. This right-of-way is improved and is west of Minnesota Avenue and north of 41st Street. A petition was prepared and submitted by SIRE Associates. They have complied with our street vacation policy. Again, a utility easement will be maintained. A neighborhood meeting was held on Wednesday, July 29th, with approximately a dozen residents in attendance, and there were questions regarding traffic and parking. In front of you here is a site layout, and I just want to point out a couple things. First, I'll point out in the red, it'd be on the north side of the parking lot expansion. They have an area designated as employee parking. They also have another area just east of Dugan Park, another employee parking area. And the parking in blue is for the customer service parking. I would also highlight that the access point from that expanded parking lot onto Norton has been pushed to the south, and it's just north of the existing dental office that is there as well. There's been a lot of discussions regarding traffic and parking, and I'm just going to briefly take you through some of the existing conditions that are there today and then what we are proposing to implement out here. First, I'll start down on the south end of Norton in the yellow. That currently we're proposing, or today there's no parking on the west side from that driveway, which doesn't exist. But in that commercial property down to 41st Street, we're then also proposing that we would remove all of the parking on the east side so that that area in yellow, there would be no on-street parking allowed at any time. The area in green, which is just north of there, currently there are no parking restrictions. We are proposing that on the east side, there is a 2-hour parking limit from 8 to 6, Monday through Friday, on that east side. As we continue north on Norton, we come to the intersection of 39th and Norton. Currently, it is there is a stop signs that stop the east and west traffic during our traffic and pedestrian evaluation out here. It does meet a warrant for a four-way stop, so our recommendation is also that'll go from a two-way stop east and west now to a four-way stop in all directions. Finally, the area in blue, today it does exist on both sides of the street as 2-hour parking increments limited between 8 and 6 Monday through Friday. Our recommendation is that we continue with that strategy out there. Finally, there are, I have city staff here that can talk to specific questions about traffic and parking. I know the petitioner has several individuals present tonight. And finally, from a transportation and utility systems perspective, engineering recommends approval.
Chad, thank you. Folks, is there anybody in the audience wanting to speak to this item? Welcome. Folks, and if anybody wants to speak, if you just want to come over, we'd appreciate that. Thank you. Greg?
Hi, Greg Neitzer. I'll get it started. This may not have to be a binary choice, which is vacate and combine it into one parcel or deny it entirely. One of those is a valid choice, but there's a third option, which is don't vacate and construct an accessory off-site parking lot. It may or may not work depending on what the applicant wants to do. I have no idea. I just want to throw it out there to give you something to think about. This could give the applicant something that they want, but protect the neighbors as well. So if we go to the next slide. Real quick, an accessory parking lot is in the zoning code, and it's a parking lot that's not on the same lot as the principal use that it serves. So a parking lot across the street, for example. Next slide. So what would we have to zone this block? I'm not real sure. I think maybe C4, but I guess Director Cooper would have to chime in on that. Can't quite understand. I'm trying to figure that part out. But in any event, it would be C something, and there would be a required buffer yard and a big one. So if we go to the next one. Off-site parking is an accessory use for the RE5 form and all the RE forms, all the bigger RE forms, so it can be done. They would be required to get a conditional use permit, and since there would be a rezone, you'd have the chance that you could attach conditions. Now, the other thing is, my reading of the code is it does not allow motor vehicle sales, but it's kind of, that's another interpretation item, so that would have to be asked, whether that was something that you were concerned about, but that's something you could probably stipulate as well. Next slide. So if it was an RE5 form, they'd need a level D buffer yard, 45-foot total when adjacent to single family. There's some caveats below. I won't go through them all, but essentially a right-of-way lets you cut the buffer yard in half. So they could go down to 22.5 feet. I would think I would want to stipulate, I may want to take that out if I was going to do it and not allow them to do that, but I'll just throw that out there. And there's some other caveats you'd have to look at that maybe you could stipulate. Next one. So this would be a great case for a conditional rezone if you denied the vacation. And then we've done this before, you've done this before, so there's some ideas. You could restrict the block to only allow parking, no structures ever allowed on it, prohibit reduction of one or both of the buffer yards, restrict off-street parking, condition the ingress and egress, require certain fencing, whatever. So essentially you have a huge barrier on the north and the west side, so the neighbors aren't looking at anything but a nice landscape. Okay, next one. So you go to the next one there, and I'll just go to the maps there. Next, the map, yeah. So here was idea number one. This again is assuming that there's a level D buffer yard required. So essentially what you see is you've got 45-foot buffer yard on both of the north and the west side. We keep Duluth Avenue, so the traffic stays on Duluth Avenue, so it's over there where it's on Billion side. It's not directed to the neighborhood. And then they have the other setbacks. Now, that 354 spaces, basically I'm just doing rough numbers. I'm going off of all of the basics, 90-degree parking and the basic stalls. It's going to be a little bit less than that. The only point I'm trying to get across is even with the humongous buffer yard, you can get a lot of parking in there, a lot of stalls. Go to the next one. And this is I'm not a graphic artist. This is essentially sort of just kind of depicting what I'm talking about, access aisles and double rows, and I'm not a civil engineer, so it's not exact, but it's just an idea. Next one. So if they could cut the buffer yard in half to more like 22.5 feet, I'd just show that, so we still have a pretty big buffer, and then you get even more spaces. You're talking 400 spaces, and it's going to be a little bit less than that with islands and things like that. You can go to the next one. Same thing again, just shows that you get another row out of the deal. So as I was researching this, today I was looking, in September 3rd, 2014, Billions asked for a conditional use permit to do what? An accessory offsite parking lot within 250 feet of a DD form, which is right here in the next to New Wireless. And so they've already done it. They did this, but it's on a smaller scale. And interestingly, they have motor vehicle sales, which, when I'm reading the conditional use permit and I read the code, it talks about what it can be used for. I'm not sure whether it can actually be used for display or not, but once again, that comes down to an interpretation. And that's just the site. That's just shows the site. You can go to the next one there. And that was their drawing, essentially their little site plan. Next, you can go to the next one. And the aerial of where the current one is at. So, what is the pros? There's no street vacation of Duluth. It removes the concerns about traffic and the impacts on Norton. Billion traffic continues to be directed onto Duluth, which they would own both sides of. If you stipulated the proper conditions, you'd have a huge buffer yard with a lot of conditions you could add to shield the residents. Now the cons, the applicant couldn't use it for use it for sales of vehicles, possibly. I'm not sure, again, it would be a code interpretation, or you could stipulate it if you wanted to do that, probably. The applicant wouldn't have the extra 60 feet of right-of-way, because the right-of-way would still be there, but they can't do a lot with it anyway because it's got utilities under it, and that wouldn't be released. And not vacating Duluth, as Director Cooper pointed out the last time we did this, it preserves access onto 41st Street, which is an impediment to traffic flow from a major intersection. The quarter-mile access points, that's something we wouldn't do in the future, but it's there, so we kind of have to deal with it. So in conclusion, it might give them an option that they could look at. With the right stipulations attached, you could protect the neighborhood. And it may not give them everything they want, but it might be a compromise. And I haven't talked to any of the stakeholders. I have no idea whether they would go for it, but there are options even if you don't vacate, I think. So, thanks.
Greg, thank you. Councilor saying let Greg go to 6:30 just because he had done a lot of homework and provided an alternative if necessary. Hope you understand. Welcome.
Bruce Danielson. I've done a little drawing here. I take this part of town quite a bit, and so I'm sorry it's a rather rough drawing. It's not as nice as Greg's. But what I've done is, even today I went through this area twice in the work that I do, and I have always been concerned about the traffic on Duluth and the way that people exit going eastbound off of 41st Street, and they whip through trying to get up on Duluth. And over in the west side of town, in my neighborhood, there's an experiment that was tried, and that is they glued down the stanchions so that you can direct traffic, and they cut off, made a right in, right out intersection over there by the High V, and when the two men were killed. And what I'm offering here is, instead of vacating Duluth at this point, is why not try an experiment with Heath being able to do some traffic counts and find out if this actually slows the traffic down. You leave, Billion will be able to put in their expansion, their auxiliary lot, and go in and get rid of the people being able to turn, the eastbound 41st people being able to turn and go north, and the people going south on Duluth being able to turn and go east on the 41st. And you'd get rid of this problem. We wouldn't have to spend a lot of money doing it. We'd remain with the right-of-way operational, and we'd still have a functional street, and we should be able to accomplish most of what they're trying to do and make it safe going back and forth across, cut down on the traffic going through that neighborhood, and give us a good flow yet. And it was just an idea that I was working on and thought I'd present it. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Folks, anybody else? You're welcome, miss. Good to have you here.
My name is Jackie Eilertson, and I live on South Norton Avenue. And I would urge you tonight not to close Duluth, mostly because of the traffic concerns that I have. When they did the street counts for the numbers, they said that if they closed Duluth Avenue, half of that traffic would go to Norton and half would go over to Minnesota. So if we get that much extra traffic on Norton, I think it's going to be hard for it to handle. It is narrower than Duluth by 5.5 feet. I think that would make it harder. And I know they have proposed that four-way stop there. That would give traffic a stoplight at 41st, a stop sign at 39th, and another stop sign at 37th. And it might slow the traffic down. I think they think it might deter people from taking Norton, but I think since we have the stoplight at 41st Street, people are still going to choose our street to go down. And also, if you would look at, when you look up at 37th in Duluth, 37th widens at Duluth Avenue to Minnesota Avenue. Whereas so that intersection is wider on Duluth and on 37th. It's a much bigger intersection, it's a much safer intersection. Even though that intersection is not going to be closed with this, the through traffic won't be coming, I don't think they're going to zigzag from Norton over to that intersection. They're going to choose to use Norton's intersection instead of that, which is smaller north, south, east, west. Also then, I'm assuming if this street is vacated that it will be rezoned commercial, which I think rezoning commercial 2 blocks into an existing residential area is too far. I think you're going to set a precedent that you're going to have to deal with in the future. Other businesses are going to probably ask to do the same thing. Ram Automotive, for example, has a large lot on the south side of 41st and a small lot on the north side of 41st, just in the very next block than what Billion wants to develop. So another one of my questions is, if they come to you and say, well, Billion got these 2 blocks zoned commercial, we want these 2 blocks zoned commercial, is that the intent of the city, that this all is commercial? And if that's the case, then I guess the residents should find that out sooner than later. And I had asked you to, you voted on this earlier in the summer, and you voted not to vacate the street. I don't see much difference except for that 4-way stop sign they're proposing. So I'm asking you to repeat your decision and vote to not vacate South Duluth.
Thank you, Jackie. Appreciate that. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Roy Severson. I have the
Roy,
dental
could you
office on
just
the
state your
corner.
name again, please?
Roy Severson.
Thanks, Roy.
I have the dental office on the corner there. We've been there for like 30 years. I'm speaking in favor of this. I think the whole project has been explained to me, and what I worry about is if this doesn't go through, what's going to happen with all those houses. I think it's going to create a real problem if they aren't, if they turn into rental houses. The traffic, just observing, I think people have a way of figuring out where the bottlenecks are. And I think by the stop signs being there, people aren't going to use that road if it's going to be a real slow go. I think they're going to find a different way through. You already see that with the stoplight there. Sometimes of the day it gets backed up, and then it seems like people just aren't going to use it if it's going to be a real flow to it. So I speak in favor of it just for the reason of if it's not done, what are we going to do with all that that's been set forth?
Roy, just for the benefit of the council, as well as the people watching, what homes are you concerned about,
To the
sir?
north, like all the houses that'll be, I know this is about the road, but then I know the idea is to tear down all those houses to the north of my office. That's part of the plan, where the parking's going to be. Those are all houses right now. I think there's 15 or so sitting there that Billion already owns. And
very good.
if the road isn't vacated, then what's going to happen with those houses?
Okay, very good.
If they turn into rentals,
Yes,
I
sir.
think that's going to be a problem.
Thanks, Roy. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. I appreciate that. Welcome, sir.
Tim Sorensen. I live at 2900 South Waltz. I'm about 8 blocks away. And many years ago, I was on a committee that actually worked against Dave Billion when he was trying to do an expansion before. This one, however, with the several residents I've talked to, we're rather in support of it. 2 reasons. Inadvertently, the city has created a heavy north flow of traffic from 41st up to 33rd via right-of-ways being granted north-south and none being granted east and west. And I think this is a start towards helping our community not have that massive flow. Duluth will be cut off. The park will be far safer. A lot of kids practice there. When I was a soccer coach, one of the biggest things that I worried about was my kids simply exiting the vehicles and getting to the park. There is a lot of aggressive drivers, and I'd like to see more steps by the city to reduce the traffic. That stop sign is great, and we live in a city that needs commercial zones. Dave employs a lot of people, creates tax dollars. Creating a buffer, an L-shaped buffer that people don't have access to, will also create a sense of neighborhood, I think, that will make people want to live there. I think this is a good benefit, and future traffic problems that may arise we can address. And I encourage you to vote in favor of this.
Thanks, Tim. Folks, welcome.
Hi, my name is Shane McFarland, and I actually live close to where this is happening, not 8 blocks away. I live directly north of where this is happening, and I must hang in very different circles because the people I've talked to are very against this. The traffic is already very tricky to maneuver, and we say, well, we can maybe deal with these traffic problems in the future. Why cause a problem? Why cause more of a problem on streets that are right off of major 41st Street? People don't want to take Minnesota Avenue. We know this already. It's already been stated multiple times. They're going to take one of these roads. If we cut this one off, they take the next one down. That's my road. That's a road where you already have to, you can tell who lives there because people pull over for the other car to go by. That's how narrow it is. If we're causing more traffic onto this road, you're going to have greater accidents. A 4-way stop is not going to prevent that because they still have from that stop sign to the next to rev their engine up as fast as they can. There's a lot of kids in this neighborhood. Putting up a giant hedge and some trees, that doesn't make it a neighborhood. That takes away from a neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Welcome.
Good evening. Paul Korn, civil engineer with Sayre Associates, assisting Billion with this project. An additional piece of information we have since the last meeting was some further traffic analysis that was performed by city staff. And one of the things that jumps out to me as you look at this, as you look at the traffic impacts north of 39th Street, which is the concerns that these residents are bringing forth, you can see that those existing traffic counts for 24-hour traffic counts north of 39th Street, when you look at Norton and Duluth Avenue combined, that's a total of 4,380 cars per day. Then you look at the projected traffic counts based upon vacating Duluth Avenue and based upon the Billion Auto expansion, that number goes from 4,380 down to 3,200. So I think it goes to the concerns of the previous gentleman where there is a large north-south flow of traffic in here. In this, the street vacation of Duluth Avenue, the expansion of Billion Auto will go towards reducing that traffic through the neighborhood. You can see that the traffic count along Duluth Avenue, along Dugan Park, would go from 3,450 cars per day down to 2,000 cars per day. So that's a significant reduction adjacent to a city park, in addition to the reduced traffic speeds that will occur because you no longer have this prominent north-south flow from 41st Street down to 37th Street. So I just wanted to present that traffic information to you for your consideration on this.
Paul, thank you. And Heath, could you just verify this is your document? Yes, sir. Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. My name is Karen Venables, and I do live a little farther away. I live about 7 blocks away. I have several concerns. The first one is that the property is not even rezoned, and I just have an issue with vacating a street before the property is even rezoned. We don't even know if they will be able to do their car lot. The second thing is there's been many councils for many, many years that have tried to stop the encroachment of commercial development into the residential neighborhoods, and they have promised neighbors that they wouldn't do that they've already established a certain strip along 41st Street and on Minnesota Avenue, and they don't want that encroaching into the neighborhoods. And I would just hope that you would listen to what Jackie said as well, that we should have those residential neighborhoods and we shouldn't let the commercial continue to go into those areas. My second issue is with the elderly people that live on the west side of this property. Lewis Drug is one of the businesses that most of us frequent, and on senior day, when you try to get all those seniors to get into that parking lot, it's a big problem. And if all of those seniors are going to have to go down to 41st Street and fight traffic, or to go to Minnesota Avenue and fight traffic, it's just going to be very hard for the elderly people to maneuver that. I just feel like that the third issue would be that this is not a very neighborly car business from what I could see when you go out there. The landscaping isn't very well maintained. They put up a fence. They show employee parking on this plan. I bet not one of you could find a parking lot for a car dealership in the city of Sioux Falls that provides on-site parking for their employees, other than maybe Vernite, that's way out on 59th and Louise. I'm afraid that the property values would be diminished on this lot when Billion expanded over to Duluth. Those houses along Duluth have now become a lot of rental, and they became very dilapidated, and I think that's what would happen to the properties on Summit Summit and Norton if this is expanded. Okay. I had one other point, but I can't find it. So, thank you very much.
Karen, thank you as well. We appreciate it. Folks, before I go to the council, did anybody else want to speak to this item? Welcome.
Mr. Mayor and councilpersons, I'm Dave Billion. Happen to be the owner of Billion Automotive and owner of the property that we're talking about. I apologize I wasn't here at the last meeting, but I think since that time we've clarified a few things that have been brought up to the council, but I'd just like to reiterate. Number one is employee parking. And the lady was right, there aren't dealerships that provide employee parking. But it's our intention to do that, and we will mandate that our employees park on this property. Right now, it's a situation where they're parking on the streets, they park up by the park, and they do load the neighborhood up because there's roughly 150 employees that are at that facility. And right now they don't have, some of the salesmen do because they drive demonstrators, but most of the employees do not have a place to park. So they're out on the streets looking for parking places, no different than anyone else. Regarding one of the comments, as far as making it just a lot without vacating the street. With that many employees, they come in the morning, they leave for lunch. There's no lunch facilities on the premise. They come back from lunch, they leave in the evenings. I mean, that's about 600 trips back and forth into the employee area where the parking would be, plus the customers that they'd be taking over there if they were viewing inventory over there. So there would be quite a bit of traffic if Duluth was left in that area, going back and forth across the street. And I think that would be a very dangerous situation, one that I don't think I'd care to try to create for our customers or try to create a safety hazard for our employees. So that's the reason why we feel like it's important that in order for anything to happen here, that the street be vacated. We've also moved, as you noticed and was pointed out, the exit over on the Norton Avenue down towards the stoplight, so there's no direct traffic that can come from the Lewis Drug or from the other, from the Billion side of the Lewis Drug property to come down, to go across and to get out on Norton Avenue. We're creating kind of a maze to slow things down and to discourage people, so you don't have, we'll zigzag the traffic so you don't have the straight traffic. The other day we had an accident, you may have read about it in the paper. I mean, somebody speeding across and they ran into a customer's car, one of our cars. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but oftentimes, you know, people are standing out there by cars. So, you know, I think it's a safety item as well. It will cut down traffic going north to the park, which I think is a beneficial thing for the people that utilize the park. I think that's a benefit as well. I mean, we want to be good neighbors, and obviously it's our business, it's our livelihood, and we want to keep it a beautiful area. We want to try to improve the area, you know, from what it is right now as far as how it looks. Our program is compliant with the Shape Sioux Falls effort. We're leaving in, as you could see, a lot of trees, a lot of berms, drainage areas, this type of thing, so that I think when the project is completed, it's going to be a real benefit to Sioux Falls, and then it certainly be a benefit, I think, also to the neighborhood, because it's going to make it more attractive, and I think a better place to live. So, and I think it'll make a better use for the park as well. I'd be happy to also say that we will comply with any of the traffic control things that City Mail, that we're not going to be parking on the street, so we're happy if they want to vacate parking someplace, if they want to limit parking someplace. We're fine with the four-way stop sign that the city is recommending. Any of those and all of those recommendations that you heard from the city are agreeable to us, and that's kind of the new plan, or the changes that we have made in our effort to see this project move forward. And I certainly thank you for your time. I appreciate your support, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have of me.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. Thank you. Folks, anybody else want to engage the council? Welcome.
Good evening. My name is January Johnson. Full disclosure, I'm married to that guy. So just be advised of that. We just live 3 houses up from the corner of 39th and Norton. As we've heard at the neighborhood meeting on the 29th, we will have approximately 28% more cars going through our particular block up to 37th Street. That is a concern for my neighbors, for me, et cetera, because as my neighbor has already mentioned, that particular block is a lot more narrow than the proposed closure and on Duluth Avenue. And the problem with that is that since these are older homes, a lot of us only have one single car driveway. As a result, many of my neighbors have 2 cars, working families, et cetera, and as a result, we have to park on the street. If you push 28% more of cars through there, our concern is that we're going to have more accidents. As it stands already, we already have a bottleneck on our particular block where 2 cars cannot pass each other if there is a car parked on either side of the street. So that would be a concern with the traffic. The other concern that hasn't been brought up, that was brought up by one of our neighbors that is not currently here today, is that there has been a history of flooding between Duluth and Norton Avenues on 39th Street. And again, because these are older homes, we all have basements, and if we were to have a severe rain season like we have in the past, or a severe melting season like we always seem to have in South Dakota, that where is that water going to go? We don't have right now it's okay because a few years ago the city adjusted that so it doesn't flood. But the representative from SIRE admitted at the meeting on the 29th that when the snow melts, when there's going to be a severe rainstorm, the berms that they're going to put up along that street are going to, the water is going to run into the street. And my question is, where is that going to go? Is it going to go into my neighbor's yards? Is it going to go into my neighbor's basements? Because I live a little bit further up, that's not a concern for me. But we are neighbors, and I worry about them having flooding issues. And that is something that I would like them to not have to deal with, because we're neighbors. And I would also like to mention that the reason I do not want this to go through is that we are neighbors. And unfortunately, the Billion Automotive has not proven themselves to be good neighbors. They've put up a fence, they don't maintain it. They don't cut down their weeds, they don't maintain their trees, it kind of looks trashy. The picture here looks beautiful, but we can't enforce them to maintain their yard. And we have traffic issues, we have noise issues. They remove snow into the park, admittedly, and I just don't want to see that for my neighbors because we have a number of children who play in the yards. We have a number of children who go over to the parks, and I feel that this particular development and closing down the street will not be a benefit to my neighbors, to my neighborhood, or to the people who use our park. So, thank you.
Thanks, January. Appreciate that. Council, questions, comments, motions?
Move to
Councilor
approve, Karski.
Councilor Karski's made a motion to approve.
Second, Anderson.
Seconded by Councilor Anderson Jr. Councilor Bach?
A couple questions, if I could, Mr.
Please.
Mayor. Heath, could you talk about traffic with us for a minute, please? I know that the engineer also talked about it, but I'd like to hear from staff just a little bit. Do you want to talk about how to...
Jim, could you put up the traffic count diagram, please? Thank you. Councilor, I apologize.
How do we figure this out? How do you know, or how do you guess or estimate what those numbers are going to look like? And what's kind of the differential there? How far off are these numbers? How accurate are they?
Yeah. Heath Hofteser, principal traffic engineer for the City of Sioux Falls. For instance, here on this site, when we started looking at it initially, for the first time it was coming through, we laid down some tubes in the neighborhood, some of the road tubes that we lay across the road so that we can measure the volumes of traffic. We had them down for about 5 days in June, and then we also had, when this was coming back through, we laid them down for 5 more days in July to get, we've got basically 10 days of count data from the different segments of road. And then we also, the major intersections here of 39th in Duluth, 39th in Norton, 41st in Duluth, and 41st in Norton, we put out our turning movement cameras that we use for counting our major intersections throughout the city. It's the camera systems that are used for, they track if cars are making left, through, or right movements over the course of a time period that we set. And we use the data from those cameras and those tubes to figure out where the traffic is on these locations, how much traffic is there, and where it's turning and where it's going. And if you, on the screen, I have our PM peak hour turning movement counts. On the left is the existing counts that we were able to get from our equipment we had in the field recording data. And so we took that information and we tried to lay it out on what was being projected for the location and work through where traffic's going to go the best we could with the information we had available, and just basically crunching the numbers, going through. We then, worked out where we thought everybody was going to go. We worked out in 2 scenarios for the PM peak hour volumes. We worked out what the existing counts were and how much traffic we were thinking was likely to see on the different segments. And we also looked at 24-hour traffic volumes through the area too, to kind of get an idea on what those looked like. And to give you an idea of the variation, traffic counts on a day-to-day basis, when you're looking through, through the week, Monday through Sunday, the different days, depending on the scenario or where you're at, there's a 20 to 30% change in what happens throughout the day. It is this is our best estimate based on the counts that we were able to get out in the area, but there is some fluctuation that you would see. It's probably, if you were to put a confidence interval on those projected count percentages on the right side, it's probably something like an 80% confidence interval. So if you applied a standard deviation on it for on Norton, that 28% increase north of 39th Street, it might be anywhere from a 10 to 50% increase that could happen, depending. A lot of it depends on how traffic actually ends up determining how they want to drive through these neighborhoods. And a lot of the things Chad was going through on where we were suggesting to have no parking and to put in parking restrictions and do different things has a lot to do with how we want to try to use the parking to help guide the traffic out. One of the big things is we want to, from that, what would, if this were to go through and everything were to happen, that driveway onto Norton, we would want to make it so that traffic could basically flow nice and easy down to 41st Street. One of the things we'd probably be looking at doing is redoing that, or kind of redoing the striping through there to make it a 3-lane section there. So we'd develop a left turn lane even onto 41st Street at the signal. You know, that's something to try to encourage traffic to go that way instead of going to the north.
That was kind of my next question, is how do we kind of guess how people will behave? And I think as these folks talk about those streets and how narrow they are, that to me says I'm not driving through there because it's too much of a hassle. But I think then what you're also saying is we're going to direct some behavior in terms of making it easier, far easier, more attractive to turn left, get out of the Billion lot to 41st Street, and not go north into the neighborhood out of that parking lot.
Yeah, that would be our goal, is to try to do what we can to make it attractive to go the other way.
Okay.
That's something that we would continually work with in this situation. So
Great, thank you. And I guess my other comment would be I just appreciate staff agreeing to the 4-way stop at 39th and Norton. I think that will be a huge help as well in terms of turning. This isn't a neighborhood you're going to want to just drive through. This is going to be a place where you're going. If you're going into the neighborhood to visit or because you live there, it's not going to be a through street because of these discouraging things, would be my opinion. So thank you, Heath.
Councilor Erickson.
I guess probably Mike Cooper, I think, is who my questions might be for. One of the things was brought up about weeds, and I just remind you that we have a number that you can call. Anybody can call anytime if weeds are out of control. So I encourage people to do that to make sure that we're keeping our city pretty if that's an issue. Couple questions. I think I know the answer, but I just guess I want to hear you say it so those that are concerned here also can hear it. As far as the staff parking, when we do the rezone, and I know that there's been some question about vacating versus rezone, and there's kind of a process and steps that first you'd vacate and then do the rezone, how it works. But my question is to ensure that staff parking, that employee parking is there, we as a council could then do a conditional permit and require that they have to maintain X number of employee parking spaces. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay.
I should say the council can do that, yes.
We can work together to do
Yes.
that. Thank you. So that's one thing that I think is a benefit to this as well. I've had many questions and concerns, and I appreciate working with some of the folks that represent Billion to answer my concerns. The other one that I asked the Billion folks was about widening the street. I'm curious if the people living on Norton, if that's something that they would want, if we were to change the buffer zone, have the street widened, or do you feel that's going to encourage, maybe Heath can comment, is that going to encourage the cars to go faster? Maybe address that, because I know that's been the concern here also, is that the street's too narrow. Well, okay, what if we widen it? Is that going to be okay? I'm just trying to work through some of the options. And I do appreciate the former people that were up here as well talking about options. I don't know that I agree with them, but I like that we're trying to think about options here. So just, Heath, if you can address the street widening thing. I don't know if I'm there, but I just am curious your thoughts.
Yep, I think that the first, or it's not something. Last thing we want to do is say let's go widen streets. So it's what we're thinking on Norton is that first of all, that section from the driveway to the south, the wanting to restrict parking on both sides and make it a 3-lane section through there to try to encourage that this is the traffic flow that we want to see. It is something that that section from that driveway to the south could maybe benefit. If it was a few feet wider, it would make it even easier for the traffic to flow down to 41st Street. I think going from that driveway to the north, and especially north of 39th Street, is not something that you would want to do right away by any means, because I think the first thing we want to see is I think that the width being narrow is something that does restrict people from wanting to go up a road like that. And if we were to go widen it, it would make it real attractive.
Right, to maybe pick up the speeds and making the street less safe.
Yep.
So, okay, my other question is in regards to snow removal. Where does the snow removal go? Just hearing one of the concerns of the residents, if that's an issue as well. Anybody that can address that? I don't know if it's even an issue.
We also enforce the snow removal ordinance. So, with this proposed plan, and I'll say proposed, with the buffer yard requirements, there's going to be a physical barrier between the parking lot and the right-of-way. So in those kind of situations, during the wintertime, the businesses will pile the snow within their parking lot. And with the landscape buffer, they would not be able to just push it out onto the street or push it onto that front yard setback. So it would have to be restricted to be on their own property. I will also say that if you look up that northwest corner of the parking lot, there's a large area that's shown as a future detention pond. So that will also help with the drainage that was brought up tonight. They will be providing additional on-site stormwater drainage for their proposed development.
Thank you. And one of the benefits I see too is the street, the road going straight from Lewis in front of Billion and straight out. I think that's great, moving that down, and that will deter some maybe pass-through traffic from Lewis and other areas around there. So thank you for answering my questions.
Councilor Jameson.
Thank you. I've got a few questions, if I could, for Heath and for Mike. I'll just kind of fire them off. But as I attended the neighborhood meeting, and I heard from the neighbors who had issues. And you just addressed the drainage, I suppose. I'm not sure if it's satisfactory to the neighbors, but you did address it. If I could, Mike, the idea that Duluth needs to be vacated. It was kind of an adamant question that came out during the neighborhood meeting. Why does Duluth need to be vacated? And it might seem easy for some of us to say, but could you just explain why that is a necessary feature?
Sure, if Jim will put that. One answer would be, well, we're just vacating it so we can get more parking spots. But I think there's a bigger answer to that, which from the staff perspective, we heard tonight testimony about the safety. If you have two uses on either side of a major street where you have pedestrians, customers, employees going back and forth, walking back and forth, it's not a very safe situation. So for this scale of a parking lot versus the small corner one that we did before through a conditional use, when you start generating that much pedestrian traffic back and forth, it's a much safer solution to having it closed off and having the parking lot expand to both sides. The other thing that we looked at from a staff perspective was, as I talked about last time, when you look at a major intersection like 41st in Minnesota, if you were starting with a brand new area of City of Sioux Falls, you would say that we would want to restrict the access points to at least a quarter mile back from that intersection. And the reason for that is because when you look at the traffic projections of two major streets like this, and you look at how the traffic is going to flow, how it's going to stack up at the intersection, you need to have those major access points farther back. And Heath can give you more expertise than I can on that. So over time, as you can see, we have signals on Phillips Avenue east of Minnesota Avenue. We have a signal at 37th and Minnesota Avenue, which is at the top of the circle. We're looking at a future signal, hopefully someday down by 49th Street on South Minnesota Avenue, which is at the bottom of the circle. And then on the left side of the circle, we have the signalized intersection at Norton. So it's not quite within that perfect quarter mile, but it's pretty close. So we think that there's, over time, going to be more and more traffic at this intersection. And so getting those access points, those signalized access points, to carry that traffic is going to be a benefit long term. And that's why when this came to us to look at from a planning perspective, there are some benefits to having that Duluth Avenue street closed off. The park was mentioned tonight. And then in terms of just the land use that I'll quickly comment on, over time, the commercial land use has gradually expanded in all four directions of this intersection. When you go east by Ace Hardware, they have removed houses over the years to expand their parking lot. Residences on the south side of 41st have been removed over time. So yes, we have expanded commercial zoning over the period of Sioux Falls development. Now, in this particular case, how far will it go beyond what we're talking about tonight? When you see this circle of influence, from our perspective, we're pretty much out at the edge of where we think that transition is going to happen. Somebody mentioned tonight Graham, and we have had discussions with the Graham about expanding their car lot, which is on the west side of Norton Avenue, but the discussions that we've had have been limited to probably one more lot to the north of where they're currently at, and by no means going all the way up to 39th Street. So I'm spending a lot more time answering your question than I probably should have. But
well, you've included a couple that the neighbors had were the continued growth to the west.
Yep.
It sounds like you would be in support of a slight increase, but not to the extent that Billion Motors is asking for. That was a question.
Yes.
The other is property value damages that they would be impacted next and near this new. And I know we're all a little off of maybe the first question is why the street vacation and then the rezone? That was a question asked tonight, and others were concerned. Why that order?
Because we believe that the street vacation, if this is going to be a parking lot on both sides, then we believe the street should be vacated. So we believe that that should be the first action to find out if the city council is going to support that. And then if that does go forward, then we would come back with a zoning plan that would reflect a lot of the testimony that was presented tonight.
Right, it's a little egg and chicken. The other is the home values around the property area diminishing because of this parking lot. That's a concern, it's a fair concern, and I don't know if you have an answer, but that, and as long as you're here as well, is the impact to Dugan Park.
Yeah, the property values is one that we get asked about a lot. And historically, when property is maintained well, that's really going to determine how property values track. If this property is maintained like we're talking about tonight, that's going to be a positive thing versus if it's going to be rental residential, and not maintained as well as it should. That's going to affect property values more than a landscape parking lot could. And again, as I said earlier, the park traffic and parking along the park is going to be benefited by having this plan go forward, I believe.
And if I could continue on with, and I appreciate the council's patience, but the neighbors, if I could with Heath, a couple questions. The four-way stop signs, the additional stop signs that would be added, I know you don't drive around with those in the back of your truck, planting them wherever you think you want to, or that anybody requests, because we get calls all the time of people wanting a stop sign. What's the or what would make you say that that's a good idea?
It's there's quite a few warrants we have to look at for where we put all-way stops throughout the city, and we do get a lot of requests for them. So we, try to go and look at each of them objectively. At 39, or it's at the intersection of 39th and Norton. It's one of the optional criteria that we can consider is when it's basically a neighborhood type intersection that's close to a pedestrian generator, and if there's a lot of conflicts that are occurring between turning traffic and the pedestrians. And what I did is I went out to this location a couple times in the evening, and we did observe a considerable number of people walking to the park and leaving the park through this intersection while there was a lot of traffic that was generally driving through, turning, a lot of it was coming down Duluth, turning on 39th Street, making the turns, or going up and north-south on Norton at the time, where they were going through the intersection at the same time we were seeing the pedestrian traffic coming through it. So it's the one thing that, looking at the intersection, if we use that criteria for this intersection at 39th and Norton, I think we're going to have to take a close look at the intersection of 37th and Duluth and using it at that one too, because we have similar situations where we have a lot of pedestrian traffic going to the park at that intersection also. And that's one that the intersection of 37th and Duluth has probably a 10-year history of public requesting us taking a close look at it, and we've been looking at it and considering it as for an all-way stop for a number of years also. So that's two of the things that we're seeing from our observations of what we're seeing at night at Dugan Park. A lot of it's teams that do, you know, sporting events, team practices that are occurring over there and things like that that we're seeing.
One last question, if you could, on that light on 41st and Norton. Is there any adjustment that you could do to that light to, I don't know, aggravate people so they wouldn't turn there, or what? Is there any adjustment you anticipate to do on that light?
You know, I mean, one of the things that we could do to try to keep people from turning is, you know, wait a long time until we put the left turn phases in on 41st Street. That's a possibility. The other thing too, you know, I think that one of the things we want to look at with the changes going on and the increase in traffic is making sure that we have plenty of time in the traffic split, basically the amount of green that we're going to be giving for southbound, so that when traffic is leaving through that parking lot exit, that it's convenient for them to go down to the intersection. We want to make sure the signal works well for them so that they consider it a good, easy option and don't want to go through the neighborhood.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Conley.
Thank you. Originally, a few weeks back, I had concerns regarding it, and most of it centered around the employee parking and the service department's customer parking, and we did not receive clear answers to questions at that point in time, but I believe since then we have. And also, as Director Cooper has pointed out, staff parking can be a condition of the future rezones, and it's not that I don't believe Mr. Billion that they're going to enforce, it's going to be a condition of employment that their employees park there, but we can enforce that further ourselves through the rezoning process. And I believe also that when Mr. Billion was referring to traffic from one side to the other, he was referring to the pedestrian traffic of customers and employees. And if we did not vacate Duluth Avenue, that would be a clear point of contention, I guess, or potential conflict. And so I don't think it would be wise not to vacate Duluth Avenue and use this lot between Duluth and Norton as they propose to. I do think that the addition of the four-way stop at 39th and Norton and also some of the other parking restrictions help resolve some of the issues. And also, I know Dugan Park was addressed as a concern, and I think it also helps to alleviate some of those concerns and issues as well, too. So I do believe I can support this under this proposal. Thank you.
Council, thank you very much. Council, I'm going to hand the gavel over to Councilor Anderson Jr. Normally, I do a good job reading the tea leaves with the council, and I'm not sure how this vote's going to go. So with that in mind, I just have a question in regards to the parking, and that is, and Mike, I don't know if you can answer this, or Mr. Billion, if you can answer this for me, but I need to know how many parking spots are going to be in each employee lot that you designate up above.
You've got the, first, let me start with the Billion Auto Kia lot. How many employee parking spots are going to be in that lot?
Okay, I want to make sure the Billion Auto Kia lot would be the one to the north.
Yes.
There are approximately going to be about 70 spots there.
Thank you. And then how many employee parking spots?
I believe let's see, 52 up here. And then there's 61 that are currently designated on the employee, where it says employee parking. This would be on parking lot expansion.
Okay. So, Mr. Billion, the Billion Auto Kia lot to the north, how many spots are in there? Is that 70?
It doesn't show them all, but as far as the map goes, I think they have 52 or so there. But there'll be all that is necessary. Let me put it that way. In other words, even if our employment, if I said, okay, let's see, there's 70 and 61. So if you had 130 places, for an example, and that's what we have at any one time on the premise, not counting the salespeople that have demos. I think it's actually a little less than that. But for some reason, if my employment...
Mr. Billion, let me ask the question.
There's room
Mr. Billion, I'm going to ask the question.
Certainly.
How many spots are in the Billion Auto Kia lot on your diagram? Is it 52?
On the diagram right now, which ends where it ends, I guess that would be 52.
And how many are in the proposed employee parking lot?
Where that ends, that would be 61.
Okay.
And that would probably, if I could continue, would probably cover the non-sales people currently. But my point, I guess, that I was wanting to assure is that if there would a need for another 20 employee parking spots, well, there'd be another 20 employee parking spots. Employees will be required to park on premise. All employees will be required to park on premise, regardless of their number.
Council, thank you very much. I appreciate that. A roll call vote, please.
Council members Rolfing,
Yes.
Staggers,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
Erfenbach,
Yes.
Jameson,
Yes.
Karski,
Yes.
Kiley.
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. Thank you, Council. Appreciate that. Item 16.
A resolution approving the release of the permanent utility and drainage easement located in part of Lot A in Tract 57 of County Auditor's Subdivision in the northeast quarter of Section 8, Township 101 North, Range 49, west of the 5th Principal Meridian, Minnehaha County, South Dakota.
Good evening once again, Kurt Peppel, Public Works Engineering. This resolution looks to release a portion of the utility easement in the north part of town, just south of the airport. The easement was established when North E Avenue was vacated in October of 2010. There are public and private utilities are being proposed to be relocated with the redevelopment of the lot at Bell Paper. There's approximately 35 feet of the easement is proposed to be released, and the remaining would be about 45 feet still there, and the utilities would be relocated into that remaining easement. Engineering staff recommends the release of the easement.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody in the audience who want to speak to this item? Councilors?
Move for approval, Anderson.
Second, Karski.
Thank you, councilors. There's been a motion to approve it, and it has been seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Council members Rolfing.
Yes.
Staggers.
Yes.
Anderson, Erickson.
Yes.
Erfenbach.
Yes.
Jameson.
Yes.
Karski.
Yes.
Kiley.
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. Item 17.
A resolution declaring it necessary to levy and levying a special front foot assessment fee for street maintenance and repair.
Good evening, Galen Huber, Street Fleet Manager for Public Works. This is a resolution that we bring before council every year. It requires action on your part to vote on the front foot assessment for the City of Sioux Falls. It currently is at $1. We're not going to increase it. We're going to keep it at $1 per front foot. This represents about 25% of my operating budget for street maintenance and snow removal.
Thank you. Did anybody want to speak on behalf of this item? Councilor Staggers?
Yes, I'm glad that in the title, people can tell that there's going to be a foot assessment fee. And that's, provides transparency here for people. The important thing is, though, for people to realize that this foot assessment fee is a foot assessment tax, is what it is. But it's still nice how you put it in the title, so people can just see this as they're looking through the agenda.
Councilor Jameson.
Galen, having you here, we're not to worry about snow, are we, coming? Every time we see you, it's like with snow.
Not yet.
The other is, just how much money does this generate?
In 14, it generated $4.6 million. 15, it should generate more because of the building that's been taking place in Sioux Falls. But the actuals are for 14, which is $4.6 million. Again, this represents about 25% of my operations budget, which does account for street sweeping, snow removal, potholing, service cuts, all that type of work that we do out there in front of everybody's house.
Thank you.
Councilor, has there been a motion? No, I didn't think so. Thank
Second,
you.
Rolfing.
Councilor Anderson Jr. made a motion to approve it, second by Councilor Rolfing. A roll call vote, please.
Councilmembers Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
No.
Anderson?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
That is passed 7-1. Thank you. Councilors, any other business?
Move to adjourn.
Point of personal privilege, if I might.
Sure,
very quickly.
Councilor.
I have a friend here from West Virginia, from Morgantown, West Virginia, high school friend, Daryl Out. Daryl, stand up, and I'd just like to say thank you for coming and sitting through a council meeting.
Mr. Lau, welcome. Good to have you here. There has been a motion to adjourn, and it has been seconded? It has been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Sioux Falls.